Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, or if this is your first time watching, then welcome. Today I want to talk about two Jeffree Star Cosmetics palettes. In particular, I'm going to be talking about the Jeffree Star and Shane Dawson Conspiracy palette and also the Jeffree Star Jawbreaker palette. These are my only two palettes that I have from Jeffree Star. In fact, I think they're the only two products I have from Jeffree Star. I used to have a lot of his lipsticks, but I just used them so much that they all ran out and I never bought any more. But I always really wanted to try some of his eyeshadows because I've known a lot of people who have tried them and they loved them, and I've always heard good things about them. So when the Jawbreaker collection came out, I decided to buy the palette. And I was very impressed. I love this palette so much. It's probably actually my favorite palette of all time. And so because of that, I decided to get the Conspiracy palette because that was the next collection after the Jawbreaker collection. And when I got the Conspiracy palette, I noticed that some of the shades looked quite similar, and I was really interested in how similar they really are. So what I wanted to do is do a little comparison video just of some swatches, and we can look at the differences, the similarities in the shades, and decide on which palette you like best. If you could only buy one, then what one would it be? You know, that's basically my thought process behind it, and just because I thought it would just be fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do some swatches on the side of my arm here, but I'm going to apply a primer just because I want the swatch to be as accurate as possible, and you know, you never apply eyeshadow without applying some type of base first. So I'm going to apply my Urban Decay eyeshadow primer potion, and this is just because it is an invisible base, you know, it doesn't have any color on it, so then we can really see what it's like. So just going to apply it to my arm here and rub that in. Okay. So the first two shades which stand out to me as being very similar would have to be this shade here called Trisha from the Conspiracy palette, and this shade here called Cotton Candy. So I'm just going to swatch this for you. I'm going to go in. So that is the first shade there, Trisha. Then underneath we're going to go in with Cotton Candy. Okay, so they do look different. Trisha is obviously a little bit darker and more reddy toned, whereas Cotton Candy is more of a blue toned pink, and it seems to me that it has a little bit more shimmer, so you can tell it's reflecting a bit more, but they are very similar shades. Another thing about these shades is that I've noticed that for me, I think that the shimmery shades and the palettes, they're a lot more buttery and pigmented, and I feel like they're just better quality than the matte shades. So they're both very buttery, and yeah, they're just very good shadows. So that is a little comparison of those two there. The next one that stands out is going to be Cheese Dust and also Suck. I can tell they're quite different, but I'm just interested to see what they look like next to each other. So we'll go in first with Cheese Dust. So that's it there. I do think that Cheese Dust is kind of a little bit chalky. Not a great deal, like it's still a quality eyeshadow, but it's definitely not as nice as the shimmery shades. So we'll go in with the next shade here, which is Suck. Wow, that did not swatch well. There we go. So that is a bit darker and more on the red side, whereas the Cheese Dust shade is more of a yellow tone. That's those two there. You can actually use Cheese Dust as a really good transition shade for Suck, I would imagine. I'm just going to clean my fingers. Okay, moving on. I'm going to go in with Flaming Hot from the Conspiracy palette. that's that there. I'm not very impressed with that swatch, to be honest. It does seem a little bit chalky. It does build up to a nice, you know, red, but it doesn't have that one swipe coverage, you know. So let's try Licorice from the Jawbreaker palette. That one I can already tell is a lot more pigmented, less chalky, and it's more of a dark burgundy shade as opposed to, you know, the Flaming Hot almost has a bit of a salmony kind of undertone, you know, like a bit peachy coloured, whereas the Licorice shade has almost like a brown undertone. Very similar still, but different. One of the shades that really stood out to me when I looked at the Conspiracy palette and you know, to think about buying it, was this shade here called Food Videos, which looks in person and in the photos that they released to be like a neon yellow. In person it also appears to have shimmer. I found that this wasn't the case when I used it, and also it wasn't very neon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare it with the yellow shade from the Jawbreaker palette. It actually swatches a lot more neon than it looked when I used it on my eye. So I'm not sure what the deal is with that. I always use a white base and I always clean my eyelid before laying down the base. So I'm a little bit confused as to why this swatches more neon than it looks on the eye. But let's go and compare this with the yellow from the Jawbreaker palette. So that one is also a little bit darker and less neon, but I'll pop a little picture in here and show you guys what it looked like when I used it on my eye, and it actually to me looks like this wow shade does. So I'm not sure why that would be. It's very strange. I have no idea. Another color that I used in a look and I found that it looked different when I used it on the eye than it did in the pan is this shade here called Not a Fact. You know, it's quite pinky toned, and in the pan it looks more of like a deep eggplant color, so I was surprised that it came out the way it did. So let's compare this one to another shade. So that is Not a Fact there, and I'm going to compare this with the shade here called Raspberry. So as you can see, that Raspberry is a bit more pink toned than Not a Fact. Not a Fact looks more cool toned than the Raspberry color, but again I'm going to pop a photo for you guys here because it did look different when I used it on the eye, and I do think it looks quite similar to that Raspberry shade. So let me know what you guys think down below. Do you think that the photos that I'm putting up of my eye looks, do you think they look like the other shades that I'm comparing them to here? Because they don't look like that, you know. Yeah, it's very weird. But let me know what you guys think. What other colors? Okay, so I'm gonna go in with this shade here called Ranch. Now that is a nice bright white. You can't see on the camera, but it's got a little bit of a shimmer. It's more of a white shimmer, you know, so it's like a pearlescent kind of shade. I'm going to compare this to Jawbreaker from the Jawbreaker palette. And you can straight away tell there's a difference there. The Jawbreaker palette, the Jawbreaker shade has a bit of a golden, and it's almost got a pinky kind of undertone to it. So although they're both shimmery whites, they are different. So that is good to know. I'm only going to do a couple more. I don't really have much space, so I'm gonna have to do it here. I'm gonna have to, yeah, okay. Right, so I'm gonna go in with the shade here called What's the Tea from the Conspiracy palette. And just pop that one there. I don't have any primer on this part, so it's still showing up quite nicely considering. And I'm going to compare this to the shade Cute from the Jawbreaker palette. Okay, so my camera just turned off on me. It does that sometimes. But here we have on the top is What's the Tea from the Conspiracy palette, and underneath is Cute from the Jawbreaker palette. Now those look very similar. In fact, yes, very similar. So Cute is just a little bit more greeny. What's the Tea is kind of more of an icy blue shade, but very similar, like not much difference at all. Next I'm going to do this shade here called Just a Theory from the Conspiracy palette. And you can see there it's just a nice goldeny, bronzy, like a light brown shade. I'm actually wearing this on my eye. It's beautiful. I really like this one. And again, it's one of the shimmers, so I really love the consistency and the formula of this palette. And I'm just going to compare this to Snack from the Jawbreaker palette. I can already tell they're different, but I'm just going to pop them next to each other just to see. And so Snack obviously is a bit more pinky toned, more peachy. In fact, I really like that. I actually haven't used Snack yet, and now I'm like, what have I been doing with my life? Both really beautiful, so quite different. So that's yeah, not a concern there. I'm just going to do one more comparison to finish off the video. I've only just noticed this. They look freakishly similar, so let's see what it looks like swatched on the arm. So I'm going in with the shade here called My Pills from the Conspiracy palette. So that is, it's like a pale kind of, very, very pale pink. I've only used it to blend out a color, so I haven't used it just on the eye, but yeah, I've tried to use it as a transition shade. It does not show up at all on my skin tone, so I would have to use it in a cut crease or something to really get the full, you know, kind of what it looks like, you know. And I'm going to compare this to this shade here called Good Morning from the Jawbreaker palette. Okay, so that's it underneath there. It's quite a bit lighter, so you can tell there is a difference there, although pretty much the same. It does look to me like, oh, my arm is getting sore. It does look to me like My Pills is almost more of a beigey kind of color, and Good Morning is more of a pinky kind of tone, I guess. Very similar though. So let's get a, yeah. Actually, to change my mind, I am going to do another one just because I'm curious. I mean, obviously not all of these shades are, you know, are very similar. Like it's a bit of a reach for me to say that some of these look the same, but it is very interesting to me to see them swatched next to each other and just comparing them, because I mean, it's so hard, you know, to come up with original things these days. If you think of something, then pretty much somebody else has already done it, especially in, you know, the makeup industry. And that's one of the things that is kind of upsetting at this stage, is that, you know, people are just trying to come up with new products for the sake of it. And it's no longer a thing where, you know, you're trying to combat an issue or, you know, come up with something really different. It's always kind of just this different version of the same thing. That's why I kind of wanted to show these palettes next to each other and compare them and just see just how similar they are, because surely they've got to run out of colors at some point. You know, there's only so many colors you can do. I'm going to do just one more because I'm interested. I haven't used these shades yet. There are only a few shades from the Jawbreaker palette that I haven't used, and these are one of them. So I'm going to, I really don't think there's any more really that look too similar. I would put the neutrals down from both palettes, but they are quite different, so I don't really think there's any need to, except for just to see what they look like together. I may even combine them into a look. I want to do it anyway. So I'm going to go in with this shade here called Tanacon from the Conspiracy palette and pop that underneath. So that is a nice kind of warm caramelly nude color. It's great to use as a transition shade if you're using neutral shadows, and I love that. I'm going to pop underneath that the shade here called Cone from the Jawbreaker palette, and this is one I haven't used yet, and they actually go really nicely together. Cone is more of a peachy, pinky undertone. Tanacon is more of a cool toned undertone, but they would go really nicely together. Then I'm going to go in with Diet Root Beer from the Conspiracy palette underneath. That is just pretty much a darker version of Tannicon, which I love because they go really nicely together. And then last but not least, I'm going in with Tasty from the Jawbreaker palette. And that is again a nice cool toned brown. And they all go really nicely together, all 4 of those shades. So obviously they're not similar in any way, they're very different, but I was just interested to see what the neutrals look like from both palettes next to each other. And maybe that is just more for me than for you, but if I'm interested in it, then surely someone else is too. So there we have the swatches. In conclusion, I thought when looking at these 2 palettes individually that there were some shades that looked quite similar, but now after testing them out on my arm, I can see that a lot of them are obviously different. I mean, these ones here, they are still very similar. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, I commend Shane Dawson for coming up with a lot of new things. Like, I mean, Jeffrey's done a lot of eyeshadow palettes. Like, he's done pretty much everything you can do. So for Shane to come and bring out some things that we've never seen before from the brand, that is quite awesome and good on him. I really love the palette. Although there definitely are some, I'm really shook about these 2 shades. Like, I didn't even think about that at first until I put them side by side. They are so similar. And I mean, Trisha and Cotton Candy, they are different, but they're still very similar. So I don't know how I feel about it. The reds too, and the yellows, like, I mean, this swatch is a lie. That is lying to us. I mean, you can tell by that other picture, it does not come out like that on the eye. I've seen plenty of other pictures of people using this shade, and it doesn't come out like that. It definitely comes out more like this shade here. So yeah, the Conspiracy palette, it has 18 shades. It sells for 52 American dollars. It's quite diverse. There's a lot of different types of shades. Now let's compare that to the price of the Jawbreaker palette. Now comparing this to the Jawbreaker palette, this has got 25 shades and a vast range of colors. If I had to pick between the 2 palettes, I would 100% pick the Jawbreaker palette. It has more shades, it's only an extra $6, and there's just more that you can do with it, I believe. And I feel like for some reason the quality is just a little bit better. It just seems to be more pigmented, less chalky. I found a few shades in the Conspiracy palette to be chalky and not match up with how they look in the pan, which is a big disappointment. You're almost getting exactly the same from the Conspiracy palette that you're getting from the Jawbreaker palette. You're getting a couple of matte neutrals, you're getting a shimmery neutral, you're getting some vibrant colors, you're getting an orange and a red and a yellow and a light bluey green. And I just feel like that this has been marked up a little bit more just because of the packaging that it comes in and also the name that's associated with it. So just the fact that it is a Shane Dawson collaboration. So that's my thoughts on the 2 palettes. They're both amazing, but if I had to pick between the 2, I would 100% pick the Jawbreaker palette. And the Jawbreaker palette is available right now on the website, and the Conspiracy palette is not. It's only available for pre-order. Also, another thing that I feel that I should mention is some people have been finding hairs in their palettes, their Conspiracy palettes. I don't seem to have a problem with that. There are a few people who have, which is a bit disappointing and kind of gross, because who's to say that, you know, the hair isn't from something gross, you know, like that's contamination in the product. And how am I supposed to know that my Conspiracy palette is not contaminated, you know? I never heard any bad things about the Jawbreaker palette. Nobody complained about hair or chalkiness. So that's just my take on things. I definitely prefer the Jawbreaker palette, although there definitely are some shades in the Conspiracy palette that I'm obsessed with that you can't get in the Jawbreaker palette. For example, Diet Cola and Illuminati. Those are the only 2 kind of shadows in there that I'm like really obsessed with. If those are your jam, if you like shimmery shades and you like, you know, silver and green, then the Conspiracy palette would probably be for you. It does actually have the best silver eyeshadow I've ever used in there. That's the Diet Cola shade. Sleep Paralysis is very similar. The swatch is different, but on the eye it looks very similar. It's just maybe a little bit darker. So there definitely are good points for both of the palettes. And I'm not saying either one of them is bad, but if I had to pick between them, that's what I would do. And I also just thought it would be really interesting to just compare them and just see what they look like next to each other. I thought you guys might like to see that too. So yeah, if you liked watching me ramble on and talk about some eyeshadows and swatch them for you and compare them, then give me a thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and tick that little bell button so you can get notified every time I post a new video. And I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.